Thank you, Paco. Right, we're going to continue with our next speaker, Josefina Garcia Leon. She's going to talk about the study of geothermal probing and surveys, geothermal surveys. Good afternoon. I am honored to be here again. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about a different subject. My colleagues focused on trees in cities, a very important element in urban life. Okay, I'm here to talk about a project which was obviously undertaken by a few people, by a team. As in all projects, I will first give you a project overview, the methods applied, the materials used, and the work conducted. To finish with, I will share with you a few conclusions. Our goals were as follows: to analyze the topographic evolution of the city over time. I remember attending a gvSIG conference some years ago. We talked about our work with all maps, and we saw that the city of Cartagena had some marshes on the northern area of the city, marshes and wetlands. We have maps which are very, very old as the 3rd century before Christ. But we had found nothing about strata in all maps, so we started to see how we could determine the evolution of all this area in Cartagena to try and exactly stake the boundaries of the wetlands. We had a number of strata which were particularly interesting, particularly the anthropic layers, basically layers that have gradually built up with sediments on the ground, such as sands, sledge, with different materials, including shells and algae even. Based on that situation, our goal was to quantify the contribution of the sediments, to quantify the contribution of anthropic materials, to study different althymetrical variations in the area, and to be able to carry out a paleotopographical simulation or model. This requires a lot of data, not only what I just mentioned, but the adaptation of all these materials over time. All our work is around what we call geotechnical probing. And it's difficult to do this. Obviously, the budget for geotechnical probing was not affordable. Therefore, we asked different companies working in the city whether they could lend us their data. It was not easy, I can assure you. When you speak about field data, things are very delicate. Besides, it wasn't easy to get the data for more than 15 years worth of probes and probing. All this probing has been done at different moments in time, at different depths, with a different status, so data varied greatly. But most of the companies recorded quite a few data, including lithological data. And based on all this information, we managed to determine anthropic layers, their depth, identify sledges, their origin, whether it is marine or freshwater, and the extent and depth of the rocky layer. Sometimes it's hard to identify things in between layers. To do that, we were assisted by geologists. In some areas, we had no information whatsoever, and so we did our own probing, particularly 9 surveys in special interest areas. In these tests, we adapted the criteria to our own goals, and we preserved all the materials dug out for further analysis. We wanted to model the whole area, but for some zones, for some specific zones, we didn't have any data. Most of this probing is usually done when a new building is going to be erected, for instance, but the topography of this area near Cartagena includes 5 hills, and there was no information for those 5 hills. We thought it important to obtain data for such an area. We knew it was rocky, but differences could be found depending on the historical era, the Roman times, the Cartagineses period, Cartago era. So we combined the existing information with 150 additional points. We then built the database with codes. Sometimes when a lot of people are involved, it's really basic to understand each other and use the same language. So we standardized the terms, the codes. We also included a little street map for people to not to lose their bearings in a way, and know where the sites and the probing points were. We also included the 3-dimensional coordinates, the depths of the strata, and other aspects too for each probing exercise. This is our study area. In yellow, we see the probing points, and in red, we have the points taken from the so-called invariably points, the hills, the mountains that I mentioned. With this huge amount of data, unfortunately, we could not cover the whole of the area, because we did have a lot of data, but not for all sites evenly. So it was not easy at all. The matrix was not even. But anyway, we came up with this staked area in yellow. And then to be able to work with the whole team, we were asked to specify different profiles for the whole study area. Would like to show you profile 1 with the current map, and profile 2 north-south. We then prepared all the models for the strata using gvSIG, and we obtained a number of models depending on the layer. The wall model for anthropic filling, the ceiling model for the Sledge layer, the wall model for the Sledge layer, and the ceiling model for the rocky layer. This model, however, is not so reliable, because when the probing depth was not enough to reach the very end of the rock, we had to use other measurements, such as that of the probing end, the end of the probe, the edge of the probe. Therefore, in this case, things are not that reliable. Here we see the wall model for the so-called anthropic filling in a combination of colors. The darker, or well, the brownish and orange areas correspond to the 5 hills of the old site of Cartagena. And we can see the layers depth with their anthropic filling. Usually the anthropic filling was caused by debris, the debris thrown because Cartagena was bombed in the 19th century, and so all the debris, all the rubble was dumped in this area near the wetlands. That's why we find this type of anthropic filling at these levels. Here we see the ceiling model, the top level model for the Sledge layer. The geologists in the team were excited with this because on the lagoon area or the wetlands area, we can see 2 blue areas which were very deep. And they were very excited about that. They thought it was not one single site. They thought there were several areas which were very characteristic. But with the new data, they managed to verify it. As for the wall model for the Sledge layer, some areas appear at considerably depth. These areas are under study at present because the one we can see on the left is Mar de Mandarache, where the former Roman port was supposedly located, which would be very interesting to confirm from an archaeological point of view. And on the north, on the lake area, a great depth was also found, which made geologists consider or believe that this was a fishing area. As for the rocky layer, we can still see the deepest areas, but we also see a very characteristic area also in the line of the 5 hills. Here we see a former valley, shallow valley. We're now trying to determine whether the depth is enough so as to believe this was an inland lake, because this was supposedly a closed peninsula many, many years ago, obviously. And finally, the wall model for the rocky layer shows us that peninsula perfectly outlined. But as I said, this model is not so reliable because we did not reach the maximum depth. Okay, we drew a number of profiles with the model, and the rest of the members in the team wanted to work with profiles. As you can see, in this profile, we see that the anthropic filling layer, which is between the pink and the red line, has a very similar potency or power, while the Sledge layer has a different level, more than 10 meters here at this point, and there's also variability in the depth. Based on this, studies are being undertaken on this layer. Maybe it was eroded at some point, so all these features are being studied. As you can see here at this deeper point, there is a point of coincidence with the sunk area, which I showed you earlier. And here we have the other profile. Here we see the anthropic filling layer. In this case, in some areas, it has no power at all, while in other areas, the level is a lot deeper and therefore has more than 10 meters worth of anthropic filling, the debris, the rubble of the city. This is actually where the Five Hills area is. This is the Sledge layer with varying thickness and depth. After these steps, we started to tackle the utilities. From a previous study, we already had archaeological reports, archaeological digging reports, and all those records had been entered into the official records of the region, of the regional authority. And so we already had the model of the High Roman period. So we thought it could be great to cross our data from our geothermal probing from the data of the High Imperial period of the Roman settlement, which had obviously done overground, not underground. So we concentrated on a little area surrounded by the Five Hills, and we saw the depth, the stratum of the imperial period based on their archaeological sites results. The archaeologists told me the other day I already have data from the Punic period. They were excited. This will allow us to gradually position and locate each historical period and establish their depths before digging, being able to predict the excavation level. So it could be very helpful to archaeological excavation and digging. These are my conclusions. These are my preliminary conclusions because the project is still underway. The Rockwall model shows clearly the existence of the peninsula. The Roxley model shows the possible situation of the Roman port, though this requires further study of the shallow valley because it could have been used as a port area. The Sledge layer has depths over 10 meters, and their depths, however, are very uneven, very heterogeneous throughout the wetland area. And the same happens with the anthropic filling layer. It varies. In some points is more than 10 meters. We believe this study could be used to identify the depth of each stratum and match it to the different archaeological findings. because lots of materials are obtained. It allows us to estimate the volume of anthropic material dumped in the area of Al Marjal. It allows us to estimate the volume of sediments carried away by water, and it will also help us improve calculations for foundations in buildings. Most interestingly, we think our project was very systematic and it can be exported to other places. We collected a lot of information. We interpreted all this information, which was formerly very dispersed, and our project allows to study changes over time and can be extrapolated to other areas. This work is the result of a big team and many people, and has received money and funding from the ministry. Thank you.